Iraq's president, Saddam Hussein, was a man who would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. To him, betrayal was unforgivable, even if it came from his own family. That's why he ordered the execution of his two sons-in-law, the husbands of his daughters, Raghad and Rana. But when you hear how his daughters reacted, you'll be truly shocked. After Saddam's death, his daughters were given asylum in Jordan, where they still live today. Their lives have been filled with luxury, pain, and unexpected twists. In this video, I'll tell you how they survived the tragedies in their family, built their lives in exile, and managed to keep their influence. You'll also see Saddam Hussein's granddaughter, known for her rare beauty, now living a luxurious and carefree life. Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq with an iron fist, and his family was at the heart of his regime. His closest relatives held the most powerful positions in the country. His half-brother controlled intelligence, his cousins were in charge of security forces, and his sons, Uday and Qusay, were being groomed to take over. But even within this privileged circle, tensions ran high. The Hussein family was plagued by jealousy, competition, and deadly rivalries. Saddam's first wife, Sajida Talfa, was not just his wife. She was also his cousin. She gave birth to 5 children, 3 daughters, Raghad, Rana, and Hala, and 2 sons, Uday and Qusay. While his sons fought for power, his daughters lived in the shadows of the brutal regime. Among them, Ragad Saddam Hussein was the eldest. Unlike her brothers, who met a violent end in 2003 during the U.S. invasion, Ragad survived. But her life was far from peaceful. She witnessed her family's downfall, lost loved ones, and had to flee her homeland. Yet even in exile, she remained a symbol of the Hussein legacy. Raghad Saddam Hussein was born in 1968 in Baghdad. She was the 3rd child in the family, following her 2 older brothers, Uday and Qusay, and before her younger sisters, Rana and Hala. Growing up in the presidential family, Ragad had a childhood filled with privileges, but also certain restrictions. She described her early years as happy and stable, living in a loving home with both parents and surrounded by her siblings. Unlike the political turmoil that would later define her life, her childhood seemed almost normal. She had fond memories of fishing with her father, horseback riding, and even swimming across the Tigris River under his watchful eye. Though Saddam Hussein was feared as a leader, at home he was a protective father who deeply loved his daughters. Ragad was closest to her brothers, especially in her younger years. As the 3rd child and the eldest sister, she often played with them and even mimicked their rough and adventurous behavior. Despite the fierce competition between the men in the Hussein family, her brothers acted as her shield, always watching over her. Family hierarchy and seniority were respected in the household, and Ragad was trusted and valued as the eldest daughter. Though Saddam was known for his ruthless decisions, Ragad recalled that she never saw him yell at anyone, not even when his children misbehaved. She told a story of how she, Uday, and Qusay would often disturb their father's midday naps by playing and shouting around the house. One day, Saddam came downstairs, clearly frustrated, but instead of scolding her, he simply smiled, shook his head, and left. Unlike her brothers, who sometimes faced light punishments, Ragad was never disciplined similarly. Despite her privileged status, Ragad was rarely seen in public events with her father or the rest of the family. Women in Saddam Hussein's family had no political role, not even their mother, Sajida. While other women in Iraq could participate in government, the president's daughters were kept away from politics. Even as she grew older, Ragad had no desire to engage in political affairs. She felt safe and protected among the powerful men in her family and saw no reason to seek influence in government. However, her childhood was not untouched by war. She remembered the beginning of the Iran-Iraq War in 1980, when she was still a schoolgirl. During heavy bombardments, the family would relocate to a safer house. One morning, as the bombs rained down, she decided not to go to school. When her father, dressed in military uniform, saw her hesitation, he encouraged her to attend, telling her that her presence would strengthen her classmates. This sense of duty and responsibility towards Iraq was instilled in all 5 of Saddam's children from an early age. Despite the privileges of being the president's daughter, Raghad's life was about to change dramatically. The next chapter of her story would be marked by marriage, betrayal, and unimaginable tragedy. At just 15 years old, Raghad Saddam Hussein became a wife. In Iraq's elite circles, marriages were often arranged within close-knit families, and powerful alliances were carefully orchestrated. However, Ragad insisted that her father never forced any of his children into marriage. One summer afternoon, Saddam himself came to speak with her. He gently woke her from a nap, sat on the edge of her bed, and told her she had a suitor. That man was Hussein Kamel, a high-ranking officer in Saddam's security apparatus. Unlike many young girls who had no say in their futures, Ragad was given a choice. She could accept or reject the proposal. But there was one condition. Her father had to approve of whomever she chose to marry. At the time, Hussein Kamel was one of Saddam's closest escorts, and he dined regularly with the family. It was during these meals that a connection formed between him and Ragad. Though she was still young, she found herself drawn to him. Her mother noticed their budding relationship, and soon whispers began spreading through the presidential compound. Girls her age would ask if it was true that she would marry Hussein Kamel. Hearing his name constantly put him on her mind, and before long, they were married. Although Ragad had just finished her 3rd year of middle school, she was determined to continue her education. Her husband, however, had different expectations. He didn't mind her homeschooling, but he was strongly against her attending a school or university. Whether it was jealousy or traditional beliefs, Hussein Kamel wanted his wife to remain within the private sphere of their home. But Ragad, known for her strong will, insisted on finishing her education and eventually managed to graduate. Despite his controlling nature, Hussein Kamel deeply loved Ragad. He respected her family, and she, in return, had a significant influence over him. As a high-ranking military leader, he founded the Republican Guard and later became Minister of Military Industries, holding a position of immense power. He trusted Raghad's instincts and often listened to her advice, recognizing that she could make important decisions even at a young age. However, despite their seemingly strong bond, their marriage was not without challenges. Ragad admitted that her husband was extremely jealous, and even though nothing specific happened to provoke arguments, tensions would arise over imagined scenarios. She was possessive too, but their conflicts often ended with laughter and reconciliation. Yet no one could compete with her father in her heart. Ragad openly stated that her love for Saddam Hussein surpassed anything she felt for her husband or even her children. Her loyalty to her father was absolute, and this unbreakable bond would later shape the biggest turning point in her life. For now, she lived a life of privilege, married to one of the most powerful men in Iraq. But this seemingly stable life was about to take a dramatic and dangerous turn, forcing her to flee the country with her husband and children. In 1995, tensions between Saddam Hussein and his son-in-law, Hussein Kamel, reached a breaking point. Kamel became one of Iraq's most powerful figures, leading the Republican Guard and serving as the Minister of Military Industries. Once a trusted member of Saddam's inner circle, he was now viewed as a growing threat. His rapid rise fueled jealousy and resentment within the ruling elite, and whispers of betrayal spread. Ragad found herself caught between her father and her husband. She could see that if Kamel stayed in Iraq, it would end in bloodshed. She supported his decision to leave, believing it was the only way to prevent disaster. But for her, fleeing the country was not an easy choice. She had grown up as the daughter of a ruler, surrounded by power and privilege. Now she was leaving everything behind, not as a princess of Iraq, but as the wife of a fugitive. The family fled to Jordan, where King Hussein welcomed them. Despite the warm reception, Ragad felt like an outsider. She struggled with the reality of her new life in exile, far from her parents, sisters, and the only world she had ever known. But nothing could have prepared her for what happened next. A few months after their escape, Hussein Kamel held a press conference in Amman. Ragad had no idea what he was going to say. She was sitting at home, watching television, when she saw her husband on the screen. At first, she thought it was just a routine political statement, but as he continued speaking, she realized this was something far more serious. Kamel openly criticized Saddam Hussein's regime, telling CNN on September 21, 1995, Saddam Hussein surrounds himself with inefficient ministers and advisors who are not chosen for their competence, but according to the whims of the Iraqi president. And as a result of this, the whole of Iraq is suffering. Ragad was shocked. She had never approved such statements, and she ensured people knew she did not support her husband's actions. But the damage was done. Back in Iraq, the reaction was swift and brutal. Saddam and his loyalists saw Kamil's speech as an unforgivable act of treason. He was no longer a trusted military leader. He was now a traitor. The people who once praised him now turned their backs on him. Even the Hussein family itself disowned him. For 7 months, Ragad and her family remained in Jordan. During this time, she heard rumors from Baghdad, whispers of resentment, anger, and political maneuvering. But then, something unexpected happened. Saddam Hussein extended an invitation for them to return. Kamel, perhaps believing that family ties would protect him, decided to go back. He hoped for reconciliation, convinced that things could be smoothed over. After all, he was not just any defector. He was the husband of Saddam's daughter. He believed his influence, history, and connections would keep him safe. Ragad did not persuade him to return. She simply wanted this chapter of their lives to end. She was exhausted from the conflict, tired of being caught between her father and her husband, and desperate for a sense of normalcy. They truly believed they would be welcomed back. No one expected what was waiting for them in Iraq. When Ragad and Hussein Kamel returned to Iraq in 1996, they were met not with forgiveness, but with a carefully planned trap. The promise of reconciliation was an illusion. Saddam Hussein and his inner circle had already decided their fate. Shortly after their return, Raghad's marriage was officially ended. It was not a mutual decision between husband and wife. Saddam himself divorced them. In his eyes, Hussein Kamel was no longer family. He was no longer the man who had once stood at the top of Iraq's military leadership. He was a traitor who had humiliated the regime on the international stage. And Saddam, known for his ruthless punishments, had no mercy for traitors, even if they were the father of his grandchildren. The decision to execute Hussein Kamel was not just a personal decision by Saddam. As Ragad later explained, it was a clan decision, a matter of honor that went beyond just one family. Betrayal in Iraq's ruling elite was unforgivable, and Kamel had crossed a line that could not be ignored. His public statements against Saddam's regime had not only weakened his position, but also disgraced the entire Hussein family. In the eyes of the ruling circle, there was only one way to restore their honor. Hussein Kamel had to die, but he was not the only one. His brother, Saddam Kamel, who had also fled to Jordan and returned alongside him, was sentenced to the same fate. Both men were executed on February 23, 1996. There are conflicting accounts of how the execution took place. According to the official version, the brothers were killed in a firefight with security forces after they refused to surrender. However, many believe this was a cover story. Other reports suggest that they were lured into a safe house where members of their own extended family, acting on orders from Saddam, executed them in a brutal act of vengeance. Some accounts claim that they were shot, then mutilated, and their bodies left unrecognizable as a warning to others. When Ragad heard the news, she was devastated. "I was very hurt," she later admitted, "perhaps more than you can imagine." She was only 25 years old, a young mother of 5 children, now left a widow. Despite the pain, she did not blame her father. Not at all, she said, though she admitted that she was deeply upset. Her sister, Rana, faced a similar tragedy. She had been married to Saddam Kamel, the younger brother of Hussein Kamel. When the brothers were executed, both Raghad and Rana became widows on the same day. The execution of the Kamel brothers was a clear message. No one betrays Saddam Hussein and lives. Even blood ties could not save them. Even being the father of Saddam's grandchildren did not grant immunity. For Ragad, this was the defining moment of her life. She had lost her husband, her marriage, and any illusion of personal choice. From this moment on, she would be known not just as Saddam's daughter, but as the widow of a man executed by her own family. Ragad Saddam Hussein never blamed her father for the execution of her husband. Despite the pain she endured, she accepted the decision with remarkable composure. For her, it was not just a family matter, but a matter of honor, power, and loyalty. She had always idolized her father, and nothing could change that. Even after his downfall, she never spoke of him with resentment or anger. Instead, she remembered only the good. However, even within Saddam's family, tensions never disappeared. In 1997, just a year after Hussein Kamal's execution, Ragad and her sister Rana were placed under house arrest by their own brother, Uday Hussein. He accused them of plotting to assassinate him. This was not surprising. Uday was known for his paranoia, violence, and erratic behavior. Even within the Hussein family, no one was truly safe. The sisters denied any involvement, but the fact that their own brother suspected them reflected the ongoing rivalries within the family. Despite these internal conflicts, Ragad's devotion to her father never wavered. Even as the world saw Saddam Hussein as a ruthless dictator, she saw a hero. When the U.S.-led coalition invaded Iraq in 2003 and overthrew Saddam's regime, Ragad, along with her 5 children and her sisters, fled to Jordan, where they received political asylum. Their world had collapsed overnight. They went from royalty to refugees, watching their father's empire crumble from afar. 3 years later, in 2006, their exile reached its most painful moment. Saddam Hussein was captured, tried, and sentenced to death for crimes against humanity. His trial was broadcast live, and Ragad and her family watched every moment from their home in Amman. On the morning of Eid al-Fitr in December 2006, the family huddled together in front of the television, knowing what was about to happen. As they watched Saddam Hussein being led to the gallows, they broke down in tears. He refused to be hooded, showed no fear, and faced his death with complete defiance. The official broadcast ended there, but hours later, a secretly recorded video of the execution surfaced. Ragad never watched it. "I have never seen that moment, and I refuse to see it," she told CNN years later. Her father had been convicted for ordering the mass killing of 148 Iraqi Shiites in 1982. But in her eyes, he died an honorable death. "The details of his death are ugly and painful," she admitted, "but this was a death that brought pride to me, my children, my sisters, and to all who love him." Despite everything, Ragad did not feel remorse for the fact that her father had ordered her husband's execution. To her, Saddam Hussein was not just a father. He was a leader, a protector, and a symbol of strength. During his rule, Iraq was stable. No extremist organizations could operate. He was a hero, a fighter, a symbol for millions of people, she said. It may seem strange, but Raghad's unwavering love for her father can be explained by how she was raised. She grew up in a world where loyalty to Saddam Hussein was absolute. From childhood, she was taught that his word was law and that his decisions, no matter how harsh, were for the greater good. Her entire life revolved around being his daughter, and even after his death, that identity remained unshaken. Perhaps deep down she knew that if she had opposed him, she would have met the same fate as her husband. Or perhaps she had simply convinced herself that the man who ruled Iraq with an iron fist was still, in her eyes, the loving father who once took her fishing, protected her, and smiled at her childhood mischief. For Raghad Saddam Hussein, family, power, and loyalty were always intertwined. And no matter what happened, her loyalty to her father was unbreakable. After the death of her father and two older brothers, Raghad Saddam Hussein took on the unofficial role of the head of the Hussein family clan. She became the fiercest defender of her father's name, making it her mission to preserve his legacy. It was Ragad who hired the best lawyers to represent Saddam during his trial, fighting until the very end. Before his execution, she even requested that his body be temporarily buried in Yemen until coalition forces were expelled from Iraq. Unlike many of Saddam's relatives who fled abroad, changed their identities, and chose to live in secrecy, Ragad has never hidden from the public eye. She has remained outspoken and unapologetic, refusing to distance herself from her father's legacy. In 2021, she gave a high-profile interview to Al Arabiya, once again publicly defending Saddam Hussein's name and reaffirming her loyalty to him. Despite the dramatic fall of the Hussein regime, Raghad Saddam Hussein has never lived like a fugitive. While the rest of Iraq suffered through war, sanctions, and instability, she built a new life of wealth and luxury in Jordan. Under the protection of the Jordanian government, she and her children were granted political asylum, ensuring that she would never have to worry about her safety. Far from the hardships of Iraq, Ragad embraced the extravagant lifestyle she had always known. She developed a legendary love for high fashion, spending thousands of dollars on designer labels. Those close to her claimed she paid for Gucci handbags and 400-pound Sergio Rossi boots with thick wads of crisp US dollars. But her love of luxury extended beyond fashion. Jewelry became her true passion, a way to honor her past and maintain her identity as the daughter of Saddam Hussein. In 2015, she launched a jewelry collection in memory of her father. One of the most symbolic pieces was a gold pendant shaped like Iraq, featuring a diamond at its center, a tribute to the land she could never return to. She also recreated several pieces of jewelry that her father had once gifted her, preserving them as symbols of her family's former power. Raghad's daily routine is just as lavish. She is chauffeured everywhere, visits exclusive gyms, beauty salons, and designer boutiques, and is rumored to have undergone extensive plastic surgery with one of Jordan's top surgeons. Her polished appearance and extravagant spending have raised eyebrows, particularly as her sources of income remain a mystery. Who finances her luxurious exile has long been a subject of speculation. But while Raghad enjoys her wealth, her political connections have remained controversial. In 2007, she was ranked number 16 on the U.S. Most Wanted list, while her mother, Sajida, was number 17. In 2010, Interpol issued an arrest warrant for her, accusing her of funding terrorist activities in Iraq. Though she has denied these allegations, her public support of groups opposed to the current Iraqi government has only fueled suspicions. While Raghad Saddam Hussein continues to live in exile, her daughter, Harir Hussein Kamel, has begun to step into the spotlight. In recent years, she has gained widespread attention, not for politics, but for her undeniable beauty, extravagant lifestyle, and high-profile appearances. Harir, Saddam Hussein's granddaughter, has become a recognized socialite. She is frequently spotted at exclusive events in Amman and Dubai. She moves in elite circles, attending lavish parties, private gatherings, and high-end fashion events. Her stunning looks and elegant presence have only added to her growing reputation, making her a subject of fascination for many. Despite the fall of Saddam's regime, the Hussein family continues to enjoy protection in Jordan, where they are still believed to be guests of the Jordanian royal family. A quick look at Harir's Instagram gives a glimpse into her luxurious life. Whether she is hosting extravagant birthday parties with custom-made cakes and gourmet delicacies, or stepping out in designer outfits, she's not afraid to showcase her wealth. Unlike her mother, who carefully balances her public image, Harir embraces the limelight, becoming a new symbol of the Hussein family's opulence in exile. Raghad Saddam Hussein's story is about power, loyalty, betrayal, and survival. From being the daughter of Iraq's most feared leader to living a life of luxury in exile, she has never let go of her father's legacy. Even in death, Saddam's name continues to shape her family's fate, with his granddaughter now stepping into the spotlight. But what do you think? Should the descendants of powerful rulers be held accountable for their past, or should they be allowed to move on? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to see more fascinating stories. Thank you for watching.